Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1997 comedy RocketMan. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I would like to give a special shout out to Sean for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. A link to both will be in the video description down below, and I will try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Rocketman is one of those films that even as a kid, I thought this sucked. I remember renting this on VHS with my dad sometime in the 90s, and it was one of the most regrettable rentals that I can think of. We both absolutely despised this movie from honestly the very beginning. Like 10 minutes in, we were already just hating the choice that we made. But because it was a rental, we suffered through it, and it's still one of the worst films that I remember watching with my dad. And that's saying a lot, since I dragged my dad to see Kazam with Shaquille O'Neal in the theater, as well as Spawn and Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Now, the film is directed by Stuart Gilliard, and prior to this, he did Turtles 3, other crappy films like A Man Called Sarge and Paradise. His entire track record prior to Rocketman was terrible. He just had done bomb after bomb, or at best, some serviceable TV work, like Peter Benchley's Creature, or a decent episode or two of the 90s Outer Limits. He had shown nothing to suggest that he should get another shot to direct a feature film, let alone do something for Disney, who at this time they were trying to do more live action films. So it seems like they were, I guess, somewhat trying to take the live action film portion of their company a little seriously, but they definitely weren't taking it that seriously when they hired the director of the pretty high profile and pretty recent flop in Turtles 3. And Stuart Gilliard, he's just a bad fit for this kind of movie. He's not a comedy guy. He's not the guy you hire to do a high concept, high energy comedy. That's not the type of director that you give that kind of job to. And this is a prime example of that. He's completely lost in space when it comes to the physical comedy, and this film has a lot of it. So if you have a movie where its comedy is very heavily prevalent on physical pratfalls and physical comedy, and you get a guy who can't direct that kind of stuff, that's a problem. Houston, we have a problem here. And not only that, you could tell that he was just doing this for one last paycheck. He was completely uninspired and unengaged when it comes to his direction in this. Just very flat, lifeless, lethargic, just floating out there aimlessly with the camera, with no real focus, no real passion for anything. He didn't know how to really get the most authentic performances out of his cast, or get certain people like Harland Williams to stop mugging for the camera for uh 2 seconds, so then the performance can be less grating, or have him do a different take. None of that, because Harland Williams, for one, doesn't have a ton of talent to work with, but Stuart Gilliard isn't the guy that can squeeze that talent out of him to begin with. So what you're left with is a director who is just hopelessly out of his element. And you can see that when it comes to the shot selection. You can see that when it comes to the techniques that he's using, the pans, the zooms, the camera work, and just how he just shoots so many scenes that look like something you would see in a sitcom or a TV movie. Just very low rent, cheap quality directing for a film that cost like 15 million. It looks like it barely cost $1 million to make. It looks like something you'd see on ABC's Wonderful World of Disney at the time, or on the Disney Channel, or something that was released direct to video, because of Stuart Gilliard's uh, woeful attempts at directing in this film. The best this film looks is when he's just shooting real landscapes in Utah that they utilized as a uh, uh, not necessarily a replacement, but as a Mars substitute, because you can't shoot on Mars, and they didn't really have enough of a budget to make an effective or a good enough looking Mars set on a soundstage, so they just shot it on location somewhere, and that's the best this film looks. And it really doesn't have that much to do with what Stuart Gilliard brought to the film. It's just the setting itself. Yeah, it's just a really just miserable looking film. It really is. I think this is a movie that was already going to have a hard time getting off the launch pad, and with a director who's just so out of his element, so out of his depth, and a director who really isn't that great to begin with, it just makes things all the more difficult. I think they should have gone with a director who was known for more high energy stuff at the very least. Somebody who could do something along the lines of like Flubber with Robin Williams, or the My Favorite Martian movie, or some of those other Disney movies like Heavyweights, and some of those other comedies that Disney did around that time. Maybe someone like Stephen Hurek. I think that actually probably would have been a good fit for this film. Not Stuart Gilliard. Now, RocketMan is written by the trio of Oren Aviv, Craig Mazin, and Greg Erb. And this is based on a story and a concept by Mazin, who apparently saw Apollo 13 one day and thought, what if Apollo 13 was a comedy? And instead of being laughed out of the room, somebody heard that and was like, that's a great idea. And this got made. This got off the launching pad and didn't explode upon entry because somebody in the industry thought that this dumb idea was worthy of getting released in theaters. Either the standards for comedies in the 90s were incredibly low, or just the standards for 90s live action comedies at Disney were below the floor, because this was not really that great of an idea. And at best, it would have been maybe an okay sketch on a sketch comedy show, which they kind of already did that on Mad TV when they did a parody of Apollo 13, but also threw in Jason in there. And it was like Jason Takes NASA. But this is just a really weak and completely unfunny and predictable and dull script. So it centers around this supposedly lovable lunkhead loser and Fred Randall. And the script is trying to make this character into somebody like Ernest P. Worrell, who is a total lunkhead and a moron, but he's got a heart of gold. But it doesn't work here. The attempts to make this character endearing come across as manufactured and fake. They don't come across as real or genuine. And as a result, this character is just really a bad character. This character does so many things that just continually make things worse. He is selfish, unlikable to the core, and is unbelievably obnoxious and irritating. There's multiple scenes where he will just randomly start singing or do not really the best impressions of random celebrities or different characters or different movies. He makes these sound effects a lot, and they are just so unbelievably, unbearably annoying. Like almost to the level of the most annoying sound in the world from Dumb and Dumber. Like him imitating some brain sucking aliens from Mars. Or him going, John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. And he'll also like repeat lines, or he'll do stuff where he'll just say something randomly. Like the crew, while they're blasting off, they're saying all these different things, all these different acronyms for different parts of the launch process. And they're like, oh, the CNS is ready. And then he's all like, oh, they're in the CNN and the KFC and the, and I'm like, oh my God, shut up. Like a lot of the time it's just like, can you just shut the hell up? So what you have is a character who just spends the majority of the runtime farting around, both literally and figuratively, and he doesn't add that much beyond that. He honestly comes across as more of a liability than an asset. And you have this whole plot centering around this mission to Mars, where there's something that is going wrong with the training, where the mission team, they're doing the simulations and they keep crashing when it comes to the landing procedure. So they decide to go find the guy who created the operating system for the mission, and the guy who created it is this total man-child in Fred. And because of the stubbornness of the mission's computer guy, Hackman winds up getting hurt, and he's now out of the mission. That leads to there being an opening, and now NASA has to fill it with a replacement. And it's up to two guys, Peacock and Fred Randall. And because of the film that it is, you know that it's going to be Fred. So all of the scenes involving him competing with this other guy were completely, utterly pointless, because you know that there's no way that he was going to lose the battle in the first place. And the whole training scenes, they're the type of stuff you've seen a million times when it comes to a film involving NASA or a comedy. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would rather watch Space Camp over this. And that film is bad too, but it's still better than whatever the hell this was. And it's also one of those scripts where the just idiotic lead just somehow has superhuman abilities, because he's just an idiot. So now he's able to break personal records set by the mission commander in terms of the G-forces. He's able to do all this other stuff with ease because he's just an idiot. He's an idiot savant for whatever reason. And I've always felt that was a particular cliche, that it was just always lame, never really worked for me most of the time. It definitely doesn't work here. And I know there's a lot of people who like the shtick when it comes to Fred, like the isolation chamber scene. I thought that was painfully cringe. And I felt so many moments involving this character of Fred were just flesh-searingly awful. He even has a repeated line where he's like, ooh, that burns the flesh. I'm like, yeah, just like watching you try to be funny. It burns the flesh. And there's a repeated line that he tries to make a thing, and it wasn't me. And I'm like, yeah, it was. It was most definitely you. If there's a bad joke, if there's a moment in this film that makes you want to slap your head in frustration or out of embarrassment, it was you. It definitely wasn't anyone else. It was you. And there's just a lot of stuff that just doesn't fit. This love story that starts to build and form out of nowhere between Fred and Julie. The scenes involving the chimpanzee. Why is there a chimpanzee here? Because it's just silly and random. It's dumb. There's no reason to have a chimp anywhere near this mission or anywhere near this story. But here we are. We're dealing with all these stupid chimp shenanigans. There's a lot of attempts at comedy that are just dragged out to the point of just absolute failure and frustration. The whole scene where Fred sings he's got the whole world in his hands. That scene was really painful to watch, not just because of how culturally insensitive it is, which I'm not really a PC guy, but that was a step too far even for me. And it's just a bad scene overall. Like, it's a scene that goes on for a million years or a million light years too long. And there's just a lot of moments like that. The whole fart scene on Mars, where Fred is farting in his suit, and then his suit's getting all bigger, and then the fart goes into Bill's suit. Like, people apparently love that scene. They find it to be hilarious. I'm not one of them. I thought that was painfully unfunny. And I just felt bad for William Sadler. I'm like, wow, William Sadler has to huff Harland Williams' farts. That's his acting in this scene. He's got to huff some farts. That's embarrassing. And there's just a lot of other stuff, like the whole Mars mission seems like it's just nothing. They land on Mars rather easily because the calculations are right on the money. They only have problems when it comes to things like Bill wanting to become the first man to step on Mars, to make the first step. Instead, it's Fred who falls down the ladder and then says, "It wasn't me." So he's the first man to set foot on Mars and the first one to talk on Mars. And that leads to more just really bad comedy where he just will not shut up. He's a blabbermouth. He just continually talks about, "Oh, I'm the first man on Mars, and I'm the first man to do this on Mars, and the first man to do this on Mars, and that on Mars, and this on Mars." It's just like, we get it. You're beating this joke to death at this point. It wasn't even funny to begin with, and now you are literally just beating it to a pulp after it's already dead. That whole Simpsons meme and that clip from The Simpsons where they stop! It's already dead! Like, that's a prime example of the comedy in RocketMan. They just keep doing these same gags and these same jokes over and over and over again. And it's painful. And it really is like having your flesh sheared off. It hurts. It physically hurts to watch and to witness. And even the mission is so, okay, we got to collect some rocks. You don't even know whether the rocks have any sort of source of life on them. That's never really revealed. You get the whole stuff involving them trying to escape Mars. There's a brief issue with that leads to Fred having to fix the circuits and so they can get back to the shuttle. There's stuff that you think is going to be resolved in terms of the antagonistic back and forth between Fred and Bill, but by the end of the film it never is. But when you look at how much of an annoying prick Fred is, you kind of don't blame Bill, but you don't really see him like fully commit to being like, "Yeah, thank you for saving my life, but you made me call you mommy, and you took away everything that I'd been working for." I've been dreaming about, I've been striving for this entire time. You took away my first step on Mars. You took away the first words on Mars. You took away my moment when I could land an American flag on Mars. Instead, you put your underwear and raised that up on Mars. Should have raised up the middle finger. Like, I'll give you some, I'll raise something up for you. There you go. How about that? But no, that of course it's a Disney movie, it's a kids film, so that'll never happen. But instead, it was just one of those things where he's just like, yeah, whatever, and now Fred is dancing in zero gravity with Julie, and Bill's just getting a kiss from a chimp. They're like, okay, you didn't really resolve anything there, and the ending of the film is trying to it's trying to be nostalgic for Disney fans because it uses the Pinocchio song When You Wish Upon a Star, which apparently is the reason why Julie fell in love with Fred to begin with. Now, the majority of this script for the most part is a complete and utter failure to launch in pretty much every possible way, but there's one aspect of this script that actually is surprisingly effective and not that bad and kind of interesting. And it's a subplot involving the character of Bud Nesbitt. Now, Bud was a part of the mission control crew for Apollo 13. And it's established in this script that he was the one that saw that there was some calculation that was off before the mission began and before launch, but he felt like it was something that wasn't a big enough issue to completely cancel the mission. But once the mission went into fruition and the launch happened, he saw that this was a serious issue, and they should abort the mission as a result of it. But when he told this to his superior, who is his boss for the Mars mission in Paul Wick, Paul overrode him and said that he didn't know what he was talking about and that everything was fine. So then when the mission went awry, it was ultimately blamed on Bud. And so this Mars mission is an opportunity for Bud to redeem himself. And he does in the end. And he wrests mission control away from Wick once it's revealed that Wick is just stubborn and isn't as smart as he says he is, or people think that he is in these kind of situations. He's not as qualified, and he gets taken down a peg, and Bud gets his moment to shine, and that was good. That was actually compelling. That was the one element of this script that kept me engaged in any capacity. The reason why I finished watching this movie instead of just shutting it off, because it was just so unbelievably irritating and painfully unfunny, is to see how this resolved. Because the script did a good job actually making me connect with and sympathize with Bud. And Beau Bridges also did a great job playing that character. So it's one of those things where you're like, can I get a movie about that subplot? Can I get a movie about Bud Nesbitt? Can that be the RocketMan that we're talking about? I would love to see a fictional drama about the guy, the engineer, or the member of mission control for Apollo 13 who saw that something was wrong ahead of time, but thought, okay, it's fine. Then the mission started, and then he did the calculations again, and then it was like, no, this isn't fine at all. We need to abort the mission. And then people were like, nah, it's fine. You're just overreacting. And then when things go completely to shit, then he's the one that suffers all the fallout and all the blame for it. And then you see how that affects him, how that affects his career, how that affects him mentally and emotionally, and how it affects the other people around him, how he deals with the aftermath, and then provide him with an opportunity to redeem himself. But this time around, it's a serious mission, and it's like an actual drama that deals with somebody finding a way, despite becoming a scapegoat, to actually escape from that and become something greater and better than that. That would be cool. I would be interested in that. I'd rather see that than whatever the hell this stupid, dumb bullshit was. So yeah, I mean, that whole subplot's like a gold nugget in a shitty script, but it's still a pretty shitty script. And the cast is not much better. Like Harland Williams, I've never really been a big fan of his. There's a couple like bit parts that he's done in other films that are okay, but he's just is not cut out to be a lead, and it really shows here. It's like they were asking him to do rubber face, pratfalls, and voices and shtick like Jim Carrey or Jim Varney, and he doesn't have any amount of the same talent as either of those two performers. He's just acting every scene like he's some kid who's just hopped up on sugar who needs to take his fucking Ritalin. Like, that's really, it's just like, oh my God, it's so unbelievably annoying. And just always turning things up to 11 and just mugging for the camera and just being the complete and utter opposite of funny and entertaining and charismatic and endearing. Just a complete and total fail on every possible level. Like, so much so to the point where, like, I'd rather take Chris Kattan and Corky Romano or Rob Schneider and Deuce Bigelow over whatever the hell Harland Williams is trying to do in this. Reminded me of his annoying character in Sorority Boys. He was very unlikable in that too. And then you got Jessica Lundy and William Sadler and Jeffrey DeMunn and Beau Bridges and Peter Onorati and Shelly Duvall for some reason as Fred's mother. Gilliard Sartain, who plays Fred's father. And what's crazy is there's a lot of Tales from the Crypt alumni in this. Beau Bridges, Peter Onorati, William Sadler. And William Sadler, man, it's sad. It's sad to see him in this. You can actually tell when it comes to his performance, moments where even he was just sick of this shit. And he was just saying his line with no real energy or passion behind it. It was just one of those things like, just give me my fucking paycheck. And it didn't even seem like he was acting when he was talking about how annoyed his character was of Harland Williams. It was just him being visibly irritated with this hack of an actor trying and failing to be funny on set. Any moment that I might have cracked up was really due to William Sadler and his deadpan. It had nothing to do with Harland Williams' antics. Jessica Lundy was just there as Julie. Jeffrey DeMunn played a, decent villain. Beau Bridges was great. He was the best performer in the entire film, if you ask me. Probably because he did. He got the best role. He had the best character with the best arc. Peter Onorati, he was pretty ornery, effectively ornery enough as Hackman. There's not really much to say about Blake Nelson Boyd as Peacock. So yeah, it's not really that great of a cast. I didn't really feel there was any real chemistry between Harland Williams, Jessica Lundy, and William Sadler, that's for sure. Kind of need that for a crew of a mission to Mars, but that's just me. And the other technical aspects were pretty terrible too, like the cinematography by Stephen Poster, the editing by William D. Gordine, especially the editing. There's numerous scenes where there's just stock footage awkwardly placed in, or there's like scenes where there's just a sequence that's just repeated on a loop over and over again. Like there's a scene in the isolation chamber sequence where it's just the guy who's competing with Fred who just is bolting upright numerous times and screaming, and it's like repeated for like what feels like forever. I think it's at least 5 times, but it feels like 15. And there's more than one moment like that in this movie. The editing sucks. The music by Michael Tavera, also pretty terrible and not really featuring any notes that are worth, honestly, a damn thing. I don't remember anything about this script. It just sounded very generic and forgettable and bland. And it's like an hour and 20 something minutes without the end credits, but it still drags because like there's not really a lot to really be engaged by. The mission is boring. The comedy, for the most part, is not funny. The other subplots that don't involve Beau Bridges' character are completely uninvolving and uninteresting or just predictable. And yeah, it's like, let's take Apollo 13 and let's make a comedy out of it. It's not really that great of a concept, and it shows. So yeah, RocketMan is one of those movies where I just I could not stand this film for most of the runtime. I genuinely had a hard time watching this because it's a comedy that for the majority of the runtime did not make me laugh. It features an obnoxious man-child as a lead character, which is a trope that I don't like and I've never cared for. I hate those kind of characters. They're nails on the chalkboard. The movie might as well shoved a rocket up my ass. And it's just one of those things where I know what they were trying to do. I know what they were trying to go for, but this was really bad. This is honestly one of the worst comedies in the 90s and easily one of the worst films that Disney has ever made. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on Rocket Man, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.